Starting the webinar.
Still 3. Oh, there we go. It's starting to come in though.
There we go. Now we've got stuff happening. Very cool. Hey, look, we've got people. Thank you. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Awesome. And I'm seeing a bunch of people. And I see some familiar names too. Excellent. So thank you and welcome to another one of our 43rd anniversary webinars. My name's Scott. I'm the main photo instructor here at Dan's. If you've ever taken a class here, you've probably recognized me. How many people are regulars at Dan's or have taken a class here before? Oh, a bunch of hands in the chat. Excellent. Very cool. Well, thanks for joining us today. It's our 43rd anniversary and things are looking a little different this year, but we're very happy to be able to provide a bunch of cool webinars and all kinds of neat stuff going on today. Normally at our anniversary events, we would have a store full of stuff and all of our vendors and our representatives would be here and we'd have seminars going all day long. And today's a little different, but we've still got a ton of stuff happening, a bunch of free webinars, and our wonderful friends at Tamron are here today for another great webinar series. Now, before we get into that stuff, I just wanted to take a minute to talk about some of the new stuff. Like I said, things are a little weird right now. But in order to help you out, we are introducing some brand new stuff. We've got some new shopping options for Dan's Camera City to help you out with stuff that you've got going on in the holidays and the situation that we're kind of dealing with. If you don't want to wait around, if you want to have a scheduled time when you want to talk to somebody, we're doing that now. We're doing scheduled personal in-store consultations. If you want to book a time to talk with somebody, if you have some framing to do, we're working on some either in-store or virtual custom framing consultations where you can book an appointment ahead of time. We're also introducing free video consultations. And even if it's that you maybe live outside our normal area, but you want to talk to some of the Dan staff and get some of your questions answered, or maybe you're shopping for somebody who's like, you've got the photographer on your list and you're kind of debating what might be the perfect gift for them this year. Get in touch with us because we're going to be scheduling online video consultations kind of as though you were right here in the store, where we'll be able to show you stuff and go over things and answer all your questions one-on-one right from your couch. You don't need to make the drive in on Route 22 past the mall and all that you got to deal with this time of year. So we're looking forward to that. All right. And in the meantime, let's see. I'm going to stop that right now. I also want to remind you that for our 43rd anniversary, we've got all kinds of fantastic deals going on from Tamron. There are some fantastic sales and instant rebates going on, but just for you guys who are attending our webinar today, Tamron's also got a bunch of extra bonus rebates, and I'm going to let Patty tell you a little bit about that because you would normally get to talk to Patty when you walked into the store, so I want to make sure she gets a chance to say hi.
Hello, everyone, and happy anniversary, Dan's Camera. So, thanks. Yes, we haven't had an in-store demo in a while, and right now, this time last year, I'd probably be standing to the left with my table, my tablecloth, and all my lenses, and all my stands, and, you know, taking over the store. But due to circumstances, we're doing it this way, which is better than nothing. And because it's the holiday season, and we're all coming to the end of the year, we're offering Dan's Camera bonus mail-in rebates. So that is something usually we only do in person at an event, but because obviously we're not there in person, this is close enough. So on top of our instant rebates, you can now get more. So we have anything from like $25 to $50. So just for instance, the 150 to 600, that has a 200 instant rebate. I could give you another $50 mail-in. So that's some nice savings. If you want to know what they are, you could call anyone at Dan's Camera, And I know that Scott's going to be sending all that info to you afterwards so that you have it at your reference. But thank you for joining us. And thank you, Jared, for joining us. Jared's coming in from the DC area. I think that's where you're at right now. Are you, Jared?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
On
So
the
I'm
couch.
going to turn it over to Jared. And thank you again, everybody, and happy holidays. Stay safe.
Real quick, I just threw a link to that form in the chat. If you take a look at the chat right now, you
There
can
you go.
download that instant rebate form. Also, open up the little Q&A panel. We're going to leave some time for questions and answers at the end.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you on behalf of Tamron and on behalf of Dan's. Happy birthday to Dan's as well. Thank you for joining us. I hope everybody's staying safe out there and not going too crazy in your house like us techs who are normally out in the field with you. I wish we could be there in person. And as soon as we can, please be assured that we will be there. If you give me just 1 second, I'm going to get this. The host has disabled my participant screen sharing, so I can't share my screen just yet. But before I do, I did want to give a disclaimer to this subject. Here we go, kicking it in now. All right, so thanks, guys. Just do this, and if I hit play, which you can't, there we go, play, done. Okay, I have two simple disclaimers. One, very first and foremost, excuse me, I am not here to mansplain this subject whatsoever. I found myself earlier this year in a unique position, which I've been in for a few years, but I realized how I could translate that from my personal life into my professional life. Simply put, my wife works in a field that's 95% male dominated. And that's something that we've had to navigate together, and mostly her, for quite a few years now. And so with a lot of the things that have happened here in the US and around the world the last couple of years, I thought that this might be a good subject. And when I brought it up to Tamron, a lot of people were excited by it, but you know, some people scratch their heads and go, oh, let's see what he's going to do with it. And I knew I wasn't going to mansplain this. So what I did was I reached out to people that I respect, that I work with, who I know that they really care about photography and some of the history aspects of photography and their own personal style and their own personal flow. So I reached out to multiple women on my team. I reached out to Patty, and I reached out to a couple other people on the sales staff, and they put forward many, many great women for this program. And I'm very thankful for all the participation that I've gotten from all the Tamron staff. And I started to coalesce it and put it all together. And I realized I needed a little more. So I went back and I reached out to some friends in other parts of our industry and asked them what they thought. Who are women that have affected them, that they thought were important to photography as a whole, whether past or present. And I got some more feedback, and it gave me enough to kind of work on. And so I'm quite happy about this. But this brings me to my second point, and that is, if the subject of women in photography is a 50 megapixel sensor, you're not even looking at half a megapixel. After I started this program, I realized I quite possibly might have bitten off more than I could chew, and that I could make one of these once a month for the next 10 years and still be just a tip of the iceberg. So please just take what you're seeing as a beginning, as a start, maybe some ideas about creativity, different workflows, different forms of photography that different women have done or are currently doing. I will let you know, I put forth two people that you see here. One, because it was someone who affected me when I was in photography school. And the other one is at the very end, which I'm pretty sure you'll understand why I included her once we get there. So with that said, I'm going to jump on in. This is, let's go to the gallery. We're going to discuss women in photography and what they have done throughout what is almost 200 years of photographic history now. So who got us started? You know, that's a really big subject for a couple of reasons. One, that's a lot of history. Two, not all of that history was documented. All right, so we might run into some situations where we're only seeing, as I said, a tip of an iceberg. So when we stop to think about it, what I started jumping into this is what I should say is, I already knew from photographic history classes, we were looking at the UK or France. That's kind of where things were going. And I found a name, Sarah Ann Bright, which I did not know. And that was something that was very, very interesting. And honestly, we didn't know who Sarah Ann Bright really kind of was until 2015. Constance Fox Talbot, for those of you who know a bit about photographic history, that's Henry Fox Talbot's wife. And that was another thing I didn't think about, simply being partners in crime, shall we say, in the beginnings of photography. And then from there, we do move a little farther in time and history towards Julia Margaret Cameron. So just to get started, let's jump right in. The picture you see on this right-hand side is known as the Quillen leaf. Now, the Quillen leaf is a photogram.
Jared?
Yes.
Jared, can I interrupt you for a second? We're
Please
not
do.
really seeing slides. We're just seeing welcome Jared Powers, technical representative, Tamron, USA.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting because it's, okay, I'm just going to reshare. It's been skipping through on my side. I'm just going to kick it back out. Stop
Now
sharing.
it says, let's go to the gallery.
There we go. That's what it should say. Are we good?
There we go. Now it says Tamron 70th anniversary.
Okay.
All right. Guess
So-
your video just froze for a second there.
Yeah. Is that better? You see women who got us started?
No,
Well,
we're frozen
excuse
on.
me,
Let's
folks,
go to the gallery. Now it says
this is
women
the-
who got us started.
so, okay. Give me 1 second. The only thing, to this. Try that. Thank you for correcting me, Scott. I really appreciate it. Now, once I go to full screen, I just need to know that you see women who got us started. No?
You know what? When you hit play, it looks like it freezes
Okay.
and it doesn't go full screen.
That's interesting because this has never happened before.
Yeah, it's always something, isn't it?
Right? Give me 1 second. I'm going to try one other thing, which I've learned some workarounds this year with how this works. Let's try.
Yeah.
Okay. No. Desktop 1 is you. How's that? Do you see me at all? Or do you see you, Scott?
That works.
That works. Women who
Yep,
got
I
us
see your
started.
mouse moving. It looks good.
Perfect. All right. So this is where we were at. This is where we started, just
Yep.
to catch everybody up. This is where I went to. And then women who got us started. I always have to step up. You'll see this photograph again because I just simply love her camera. It's used throughout. So I will step back to when I was speaking about Sarah Ann Bright. This is her on the upper right-hand side. And then this is a photograph of Julia Margaret Cameron here at the bottom. There is one photograph of Constance Fox Talbot left, as we are aware of in the world, and we're going to see that here in a second. So these are the three women I discussed from the beginnings of photography in 1839 in the United Kingdom. So when I kick it forward, Sarah Ann Bright. So the picture you're seeing on the right-hand side is this Quillen leaf. Now, the Quillen leaf came up for auction in New York in 2015, and the auction house wasn't completely sure about the provenance of what this leaf was. So they called in some leaf experts. They called in photo experts. They called in all these different people. And the issue with it was that there were some inscriptions on the back that we couldn't quite recognize or figure out. That we knew that was who we needed to attribute it to most likely, but we couldn't rectify the situation. And with a lot of searching, with a lot of good scientific and archival people, it was finally realized that this belonged to Sarah Ann Bright. And then the next question was even more limited. Who is Sarah Ann Bright? And she was the daughter of a British financier who chose to use the money that he made to put into the arts and the sciences, most predominantly sciences of the day. And if we think about the 1820s and 1830s, our knowledge as a species was a little limited in forms of science. And so she had the ability at that time to use her father's money to be able to produce works like this. And so currently, I don't have a lot that I can tell you about her. She is kind of a subject that we are trying to learn about more as best I understand it. So on to Constance Fox Talbot is someone we do know because we know her husband's contributions very much so. But this isn't about husbands, right? This is about Constance. And when I discovered this, it really excited me. As I said earlier, I never thought about partners in crime. We're talking about a time in the beginning of photographic history when people built their own cameras out of wood and brass, all right? There wasn't a lot to go off of. We didn't all have to make choices between DSLR and mirrorless and things like that. This is very much, if you want to do it, you have to get out there and put the hard yards in yourself and prove this science. And she was able to do that. And so between her and Sarah, we do not specifically know which one of these two women might have taken the exact first picture. But Constance is known, as you see at the bottom, for a very famous photograph of the Irish poet Thomas Moore. And that's one of the things we actually see as we progress through time and we get to Julia Margaret Cameron. You know, at this time in the history of photography, it was used for either a documentation for legal purposes, for criminals, things of that nature, or it was used to document people, such as this gentleman you see here in the middle, who is Lord Tennyson, the former poet laureate of the United Kingdom. Julia was very well known at the time for using her camera and wanting to do one of two things: taking portraits, really good portraits of the famous people of the day, or creating these beautiful kind of ethereal pictures of scenes that would clearly illustrate different types of poetry, different types of literature, historical stories, cultural stories, things of that nature. It was a way that she could use her own creativity to interpret either stories of the day or stories from the past. And so when we go forward, a prime example is this little cherub looking girl on the right-hand side, which is something that she greatly enjoyed doing. And then on the left-hand side, again, another one of her most famous and arguably one of the more famous photos of that gentleman, that is Charles Darwin. So very early on, before we have ever hit 1900s, we can see this very large body of work that has been given to the world, whether it's documentary or whether it's artistic and creative, that we all should be quite thankful for. So after that, we moved into the 1900s and we had a little bit more acceptance of maybe women being in photography, women being in various aspects of our daily life or our world. And one of the ways we kind of came to know that is this advertisement. I love this. This is from 1918, and this is Kodak actually trying to advertise to women photographers of the time. What blows me away about this simple little postcard of an advertisement is, if you take it in, you see this boy in the center, right? And he's caught a fish, arguably a extraordinarily large fish. I would be proud if I was bringing that home, right? I think any of us would be. He doesn't care about that fish. He does not care at all. He is wondering what this girl is doing with the only piece of technology in the whole scene, right? What is she doing? What is she? He doesn't understand. And even in my imagination, the younger gentleman on the right-hand side is yelling across the bank for his friends to come over and see what this girl is doing. And I just think that's a really awesome advertisement. So with this level of acceptance, we also started to see a change in what photography had been as a whole. And people like Imogen Cunningham were at the forefront of this. Instead of that ethereal, that kind of soft focus look that we had seen in the 1800s, people like Imogen decided that they wanted to have things a little more tack sharp. They wanted to shoot some different subjects or look at subjects differently. And she was part of a very famous group of photographers known as the Group of F64, based out of California. The quantity of people in this group was a little loosely determined. Some people claim to be in it that may or may not have been, but we're looking at a 12 to 15 person collective of photographers who were concerned with sharpness and with simplicity of nature, but of subject as well. So when we look at some examples of her work on the left, of course, she did, she started doing what had already been done in photography. But then you look at that centerpiece, and that is, we're looking at some of the very early beginnings of portrait still life that don't kind of mimic painting, right? We're looking at good contrast, extremely controlled lighting. And I sometimes I can relate to this. In my photographic studies, I was a very big fan of Edward Weston, who was also in the group of F-64. At this time, they all lived in California, New Mexico, Arizona, or northern Mexico. They had ample light, more so than I do have here on the East Coast most days. It was probably much more golden. And then California being the bastion of different, well, size, but different types of fruits, vegetables, plant matter, things of that nature. They had access to all of these different subjects that we wouldn't normally necessarily see today. You can look at any of the fruit and vegetable work of anybody in F-64 and you will see some amazing, amazing fruits and vegetables that we don't really see in those shapes today. And so continuing on with that sharp focus, on the right-hand side is another very, very famous woman. That is the Mexican artist Frida Kahlo, for those of you who do not recognize her. And Frida was someone who came in and out of California and worked, or I should say a lot of photographers from California would go down and visit in Mexico as well. So that was what imaging was doing at the turn of the 1900s and into the early 20s. From there, we go into Dorothea Lange. Now, many of us probably do know Dorothea Lange by photo if we don't know her by name. For many Americans who would be my grandparents' age, great-grandparents' age, when we are talking about the Great Depression and we're talking about the Dust Bowl here in the United States, predominantly in the southern United States at that time, we wouldn't, I say we loosely, we as in the people of that time, if you weren't living in that Dust Bowl, you may not have known what was going on. And the way we came to learn about this is because the Farm Security Administration had a budget, they passed an act and sent photographers out into the field to see what was really happening. And those photographs came back, ended up being published, whether by the government or other agencies, such as, I believe they were in Life magazine as well. And that is how we came to recognize this picture on the right-hand side that you see. And I've known that picture for a long time. It has stuck with me. I don't know how it can't. If you think about American history, that's one of the poorest times in our lives and one of the hardest struggles. And when I look through her imagery, what blew me away is this photograph on the left. You know, you still see it. You still see people who didn't have much, right? There's not a whole lot. They're living out of their cars. They're trying to escape. They're trying to escape the harsh environment. They're trying to escape the lack of money, things of that nature. And they still look to be very strong people. They are not necessarily defeated. You can tell that they are having a hard time, obviously, right? But these women are still portrayed in what is a very strong light. It doesn't matter how poor this woman is on the left, she is still there taking care of her two children, no matter how dirty they or herself are. It doesn't matter. And so I really appreciated how her imagery spoke to the power of the people of the time. And she was not the only FSA photographer. And if this is a subject that interests you, I highly suggest you go look into FSA. Many famous American photographers, well, not many, a handful, were part of this this administration, what they did, and the black and white work was bar none. It's very, very beautiful for the delicate subject matter that it is. This was my first entry point. My background is photojournalism, and in studying that in college, I came across the name Elizabeth Lee Miller. And as I started learning about her a little more, I was very intrigued. Lee was a very beautiful woman. She started out somewhat as a model in New York City for Vogue. And the way that came to be is she accidentally, well, she was stopped. She almost accidentally stepped in front of a car on 6th Avenue in Manhattan. And the gentleman who pulled her back from being hit by that car was Condé Nast, the man Condé Nast, not the publication house. And from there, she got a modeling career, but that's not really what she wanted. And she came from a family of photographers and airplane pilots at the time. And so after kind of pushing back on the modeling, she had the opportunity to go to Europe for World War II due to connections with Vogue magazine, as well as the United States Air Force. So this is her in a small squadron, shall we say, of women photographers who were working, trying to document things and help out with the war effort in Europe, not being forced or not staying back here in the US at the time. And she was a troubled person. She had some problems before she ever went into war, but her ability to handle those problems and her ability to have the connections, I guess, that we see at Vogue magazine allowed her, I would likely guess, to get shots like the one you see in the center. That is the famous actor Clark Gable. At that time, it didn't matter. I can think of all kinds of famous people, sports personalities, singers that were called to war all throughout time. And so she was able to get shots like this that would be palatable for Vogue magazine. Obviously, Vogue wasn't really going to show a lot of bodies in trenches. And then this picture on the right-hand side is by far one of my favorite ever for everything that it is, it says, and it does. I see that umbrella catches my eye immediately. And the first thing I think is, oh, it's a beach scene, right? This is really exciting. And then you realize that that's actually the famous photographer, David Sherman, and he is in a war zone. That's why he's wearing a gas mask. But when you kind of think of it in today's context, the reason that umbrella is there is because the umbrella is shielding the sun from the ground glass. How many times do we complain with mirrorless photography these days that we can't see the back of the screen, right? We don't have to carry a big umbrella around like they did when you're using a 4.5 or an 810 ground glass, right? To try and delicately find focus. So photography could always be more difficult. That's one thing I do try and remember. I do just want to step back because I realized I skipped it. This photograph of Lee is a famous one of hers, and it's one that she never really liked. Her and another photographer were in Munich after Munich had kind of been bombed out. They had an address which they had been told was actually Hitler's a secret apartment that he had. And sure enough, it was there and it was in one piece. And so you see the picture of Hitler on the left-hand side there and her war boots. And I can understand this, where you've been in a war zone and all you really want to do is just relax. Unfortunately, she became quite known for this photograph, and it wasn't something that she necessarily liked, but it summed up a lot of what war photographers kind of dealt with during that time to me. And that's why this photograph stuck with me. So that is Lee Miller. Now, that gets us to kind of World War II-ish, just past the war. And again, very small tip of this iceberg. So I was curious. I needed to bring it more to modern times. Who is it that's keeping it pushing? And I wanted to keep it a little close to home to start. And that was kind of easy to do because I'm on a tech team of there's 7 of us now, and 3 of us are women, right? And these 3 women have helped me all throughout various ways and various times. They are photographers in their own right, and they do some amazing work. Jillian is out of Minneapolis, and she does really, really amazing macro stuff. And she goes around to college programs and teaches that on behalf of Tamron. She runs our educational program for universities, and she does an amazing job of it. Erica Robinson is someone who I actually knew before she worked for Tamron or before I worked for Tamron. And she's worked for Tamron way longer than I have. We actually worked for a former photographic company together, and we didn't know each other. We were cruise ship photographers. She worked on a ship that was on one side of Hawaii, and I worked on the other side of Hawaii, and we just constantly rotated around. The reason I have become such good friends with Erica is she very much wants to take her camera with her traveling. That's what makes her happy and makes her content. And that is something that I can greatly understand. I've been lucky to travel to 27 countries. And so when Erica took a group of people about 2 years ago down to Cuba with a Tamron program to go photograph, hearing her talk about how, you got there and who knows? Americans hadn't been in Cuba in quite some time. So you don't know what you're going to face. You don't know the situations, the people, the sounds, the sights, the worries, the weather patterns, all these things. And hearing her talk about the different challenges and seeing them explained very clearly in all kinds of beautiful photography was something that really has always stuck with me. in regards to my peers within this industry, Janet is all smiles, as you can see there. She is a bit of the glue in our team. She keeps us laughing and keeps us together. And her background is video as well as stills. And she is rock solid as well. Both of those ladies are operating out of California. So if that's my team, when you step up above us, if you've met any of us at a trade show, you might bump into one of our ambassadors like Marcy Reef. Now, Marcy is very similar to Janet in this way, smiles, all smiles. Even when you're at a trade show and the program that you're trying to teach, the computer connections and the camera connections to the TV connections aren't working and you're going crazy, she still has a smile on her face and she still is just paying attention to the people right in front of her. And that is evidently clear in all of her photography. She's a family portrait photographer and she really gets some beautiful shots out of people that you can easily see here, right? Now, one of the nice things about Marcy is, besides being a Tamron ambassador, she teaches her own workshops with a lady named Kelly Beeser. I've never met Kelly, so I don't want to, I may have mispronounced her name. Excuse me. But they do these wonderful workshops, which continually receive really good praise from women who are trying to up their game in family portraiture or wedding styles or things like that. And one of the reasons both these women do so well is because of how they can easily relate to their subject, whether it's a smile, whether it's conversation, or whether it's a photograph. And so if that's something you're interested in, I would highly suggest that you check out her work. And you'll see a lot of Marcy's work sometimes when we release new lenses. Marcy gets the opportunity to test, and maybe that comes out in our advertising, as is the case with these two little girls in the upper left-hand corner. So I am a little biased. Alex's name was put forth, and I'm glad it was. She is one of my favorite ambassadors, and I'm a little biased. I studied photography in Australia, and Alex is from Western Australia. One of the bigger reasons Alex is here is for something that's not posted and something that nobody is ever going to know, probably. Alex spent 15 years as a police officer, and she gave it up because she started seeing enough stuff that she didn't want to be a part of. She didn't like. It was changing her, or, you know, you can take a guess. And instead of letting that get to her, she turned it around. She became a photographer, and she put her time and her efforts and her mind and her clicking finger into really, really amazing animal photography. And that photography is based around animals in need, whether they have been abandoned, whether they are abused, whether they've survived a wildfire, all kinds of things of that nature. As a matter of fact, another company just made a short film about her, which launched yesterday, if I'm correct, in Australia. Short films, TV, she's done some really interesting books, and you can kind of see here why. I love this hairless cat on the left-hand side. I know not everybody, sometimes we see hairless cats and it makes us a little creeped out. As somebody who's a little hairless up here, I wish I could get a portrait that is that strong, okay? If that cat could speak English, I would surely think that it would be happy with what she did. The orangutan on the right-hand side is something that she took a little while back. Well, I think about 2 years, I think. Continually won another award yesterday for the story of this orangutan and what has been going on with it. But she has this other way of this showing happiness from animals that they don't. This poor dog on the right, I believe, is abused, and if memory serves, I think it might be three-legged. And as you can see, this beautiful bird on the left-hand side only has one leg as well. But very happy animals. She's not biased. Obviously, she does pet photography for people. Everybody's got to have a bread and butter business, but she does shoot all kinds of different animals. And I know that since some of the wildfires and koala related issues and things of that nature, I think she's been lending her talents to that, as well as the quokkas, which are small little birds that live on Rottnest Island off the coast of Western Australia. That is her latest little book. So if any kind of animal photography excites you, I highly suggest you check out Houndstooth Studio. Or if you just need a general dose of happiness in your Instagram feed, Houndstooth Studio. It's when they post this, there's going to be a bunch, but it's just all going to be animals that are just going to make you smile real quick. It definitely brightens my day. And so those are just two of our ambassadors. Now, the name that just comes up is a big one. It was put forth by quite a few women, and rightfully so. In the back of my head, I kind of knew Annie was always going to be there for another reason, though. When I was in college, not too long ago, but long enough, I was privy to, I don't remember why, whether it was required for a course or something, some research I was doing. I came across at the time, the list of the top 10 highest paid photographers in the world. And Annie was the only woman on that list. And even then, that didn't sit very well with me. While I could understand, it didn't mean I had to like it. So I can't say a ton about Annie because most of us know who she is and what she's done. I mean, her work is, when the Library of Congress calls you a living legend, that's a pretty big deal. But I can illustrate it with a couple of her images. This picture on the right, some of you may know about or may not. That is John Lennon and Yoko Ono. She was a friend of John Lennon's, and this photograph was taken 5 hours before John was murdered. And actually, that 40th anniversary of that was just this past Wednesday, I believe. It was Tuesday or Wednesday. Them being friends, she came in very loosely, as photographer friends would do, I guess, because John was a photographer as well. Yoko being an artist, they were all three artists. I don't know that she had a ton in her mind what she was going to do, and they just played loosely. And John decided he wanted to take his clothes off and do this. And they take a few shots, they get the job done. John stands up, puts his clothes back on, and they make an agreement that she'll do her best and she'll have him on the cover for the next month. And they shake hands, and Annie walks out the door. And then the rest of the story unfolds the way it does. I love how you can even see John's pants in the bottom right-hand corner there, just hanging off the bed. So early, this was her Rolling Stone work, and music-based, but still portraiture. So leaving there, she began to work more for Vanity Fair, as we can see on the left-hand side. And this is more of what she is known for today, these beautiful, amazing portraits of very, very strong individuals who have most likely affected our culture in one way or another, and almost always for the positive, as best I can think of. If you're someone who wants to shoot fine art portraiture, there are plenty of books that you could study of hers and see all kinds of, whether it's techniques on lighting, whether it's techniques on background usage, whether it's black and white or posing, or in the case of John, not posing. Annie has a lot to teach us all, and she will continue to, I have no doubt. So her being one of two, I started doing research for this, and I got excited. It's been a few years, but finally now there's 2 women on that list. So 2 of 10. We're making some inroads. I want to see more, and I'm sure it will come. But this is Lindsey Adario, and Lindsey Adario is currently probably one of America's most prolific photojournalists, whether male or female. And she's not shied away from going to many places, if any at all. One of the things that I appreciated most about learning about her, my friend Erica's, who put Lindsey forward as a name, and I didn't really know the name. But in my head, I remembered being at a couple trade shows and women asking me questions on the counter and saying, oh, I say, what kind of work do you shoot? And they say, oh, do you know Lindsey Adario? And I would say, no, I don't. And in hindsight, now I feel quite foolish for having not. I believe it was a TED Talk that I heard her say, not all photojournalists have a death wish. Not all of them are raging alcoholics and just want to run off into war. There are other reasons to be a photojournalist. And that greatly stuck with me, and that was something that I appreciated about her work. And when I started looking in, the one way I know how serious she is as a photographer and serious about photography is if you go to her website, or at least when I did 2 months ago, there's no about section. You can contact her, but there's nothing but imagery, 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 imagery. Very specific projects showing very specific things that are occurring around the world or have occurred. It's not about her. It is very much about the people she photographs. And that kind of stuck with me, this image on the left. You know, we immediately see this young girl, and I think it tugs at most people's heartstrings, and they think, oh, you know, this is really sad. This upsets me. And I see that, and it does, obviously, but if you take the image in as a whole, you see all these older women surrounding this young girl, and they are not crying, right? They may not be happy, but this little girl is safe. She is very much safe despite her tears. What saddened me even more about this photograph is you see the little tree over her shoulder. That's most likely a cedar of Lebanon. And so I can ballpark where part of the world she's from, Lebanon, Syria. I've also lived close to that. And so for me, what was saddest is that this poor girl living in this war-torn area to a degree has to rely on what is most likely a blonde-haired, blue-eyed doll to grow up with, when that's not what she looks like. That's not what she sees on a daily basis. That was just super powerful to me. And then the image on the right, obviously, women's empowerment of taking their own health into their own hands in the continent of Africa, which is something that the whole world has been grappling with for a couple decades now, helping Africa achieve many health goals for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness of all peoples there. She has worked with the US military, obviously, in various places. That image on the right, it just sticks with me. I think it'll probably stick with me for a lot longer than I can imagine. How do you push yourself to the edge of the world and still see that kind of color? Like it's just kind of mind-boggling to me that you just see nothing around, like hardly even green. But this vibrant blue, that she was willing to put herself in a place where something like this could be found. And so I can clearly see why she is on that top 10 list, and I hope that she makes it all the way to the top. I do want to say loosely, we never know how much anybody makes, so that list isn't, you know, it's not like the Forbes top 100 or something like that. This is just a loose basing on what we think we know within our industry. So, who's next? Who is doing it today? So right now, who's out there keeping it pushing? More and even more so. And I know many of you say, all right, Jared, who, you know, it can't be the wealthiest shooter in the world. It can't be the tech team, but who were the people that the people on my team put forward? And I ran into some interesting ones. Diane Arglis, I believe actually this one might have come from Patty, and this is a personal favorite of mine too. For those of you who do not know, Diane Arglis was a photographer in New York City who struggled with some mental health issues, and she chose to work through some of that by photographing people on the fringes of society around Hell's Kitchen and around Central Park in the 60s, 70s, early 70s. She took her own life in 1971. Now, at that time in 1971, she had two daughters. One of them was Amy, and Amy was 17 years old at the time. Amy went on to become a photographer very much in her own right. I don't always like using the term following in your mother's footsteps, but obviously her mother impacted her enough that she chose to do this for the rest of her life, and did so well that, you know, some of her clients are American Express and New York Magazine, People Magazine, things of that nature. So one of the things Amy is known for is throughout the 70s, if she was 17 in 1971, she continued somewhat in the vein of her mother and photographed people on the street in New York in the early 80s, as you see two shots from one of her books here on the right-hand side. She's done quite a few books, and to the best of my knowledge, they have all received pretty critical acclaim. So if that 80s kitsch of New York City is something that interests you, I highly, highly recommend it. Checking out any of her books, to be honest. On the left-hand side, you do see a photograph of Diane holding up what is arguably one of her more well-known and disturbing photographs. That is a young boy in Central Park. I believe I do not know what kind of mental issues he had, but he was not completely whole of mind, and he is sitting there holding a grenade. And that was, I used to live in New York for many years, and I never came across anybody holding a grenade in Central Park. So I can't imagine what that would be like as a photographer, just walking through your park and seeing this. Both have had a great impact on the landscape of American photography. And so if this is something that interests you, I highly, highly recommend you look into their work. For the fine artists in the crowd, you might want to know who Sally Mann is, if you do not already. Now, I'm kind of lucky. Sally Mann actually lives just about 2.5 hours south of me, down at the other end, the bottom end of the Shenandoah Valley. This is her on the left-hand side with that gigantic camera that you see there. I can't imagine how big the umbrella would be to cover the ground glass on that one as well, if you're trying to focus it in bright sunlight. So Sally's work is highly represented. Her website is actually really, really beautiful. She's recently done projects based around Appalachia, portraiture showing just simply the face and using older photographic processes that we don't use anymore, like wet collodion and things of that nature. As you can kind of see from this image on the right-hand side, she has this way of showing, shall we say, Southern life, Appalachian life, and in a very powerful and many times I kind of felt female-centric viewpoint, and very much based around a fine art sense of what photography could be. She's one of 2 fine art photographers that were put forward, excuse me, but I do feel personally that she is probably one of America's least talked about, best kept secrets when it comes to fine art photography of this vein. So from there, we move on to some people who are now keeping it working every day. You know, Sally has the luxury of hanging out in her house and shooting when she wants to. There are many women out there who are not as established, and they are still trying to work very hard at what they do. Megan Delawal is one of those people. She hails from Mexico City, and she, like many people working in the journalistic aspect of photography, is quite concerned with how people are portrayed and the problems that might exist. The image on the right you see is actually of people just across the border. She's been documenting the caravans of people coming from Central America through Mexico up to the US border. She has used her images not only, you know, for a newspaper setting, as you see, New York Times, Washington Post, but for a charitable function as well with Direct Relief International. And that's something that you're going to see with almost every single woman that's going to come from here on out, is a clear and concise usage of a business purpose for photography, but also a usage to give back. And that was something I greatly appreciated discovering from these women who were put forward to me. I did not know Megan, just as I did not know Maria Balcazar. Now, Bolivian American, Maria's work was really, really exciting to me. Besides the love of travel, you know, us being from North America, it's kind of easy to look south. We know we have neighbors in Central America and Southern America, and we know that a lot of times they have very colorful lifestyles. And by that, I mean, I think of the clothing and the culture, the landscapes at times. What blew me away about her work is she would go down to these various countries in South America, go back, I should say, and she would document the cultural, not programs, but holidays, the exciting times, the parties, the things that were going on at various points in the year. And when you look at her website, it's not always crisp and sharp like we see this beautiful black and white image on the left. And she does have a very adept usage of black and white, but she would use time and shutter to help you understand the movement of people, the celebration, shall we say. Really good source of creative viewpoint on maybe how to photograph crowds and events. Definitely someone to look into if that is what you enjoy doing. Courtney Gerrard, have you ever met someone who has a master's degree in natural resources journalism? I didn't even know that thing existed. She is someone who loves the world, loves the natural world, went out and started shooting and doing some things, and then realized that she was pretty good at it. And instead of trying to do a bunch of things, she narrowed it down, and she started working with companies that share her same values, such as Gore-Tex, Patagonia, and Yeti, and helping them engage with people and put out their viewpoint in the world and help them by using imagery to do so. I greatly appreciate that. Again, like I said, that's one way you see a lot of these people giving back. Amy Toensing, this image on the right, I enjoy a little bit of geometry, a little bit of mathematics in my photography. It's two men holding two drinks, two girls in two bikinis. There's something crazy about this photo that to me sums up America as a whole, and most definitely the New Jersey coastline where that was photographed. But she can find herself in positions like this, having done quite a lot of work for National Geographic. She has traveled all throughout the Pacific, and she does work with not just escapes like this. You know, it is things that have happened, maybe negative, whether environmental, whether it's the cause of, you know, modern day life, it's food insecurity and things like that. Some of the issues that we've come across, whether you are an indigenous person or you're just simply you're an American and it's Hurricane Katrina. She is someone who is definitely very well known, I believe, these days, and very, very worth a look at. I don't know that I could speak about her enough. Anush Babajanyan is an Armenian photographer, and she touches me a little bit too. I was very thankful that all these names put forward, somehow they clicked with me. Or maybe I accidentally discovered that I knew them. I didn't know Anush. I do know that I have family that live very close to Armenia and or are Armenian. I know that before I started putting this together, many of you might have seen in the news recently the Nagorno-Karabakh issue, where there's been a small war going on between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And while that is, I believe, calmed down at this point, it's not something that's necessarily going away. Right south of there, and partially in their countries, you have the Kurdish people, who 6 million people with no formal nation to live in. They live in the mountains, and they're constantly pushed around by country to country to country. At times, ourselves included, doing that to them. So she has chosen to use her photography very much to point it back towards her people and help her people understand each other, understand a way of lives, and see that we're all the same, and that it's okay. It's okay to be different. We don't have to fight, you know. It's okay that you live over there and I live over here, and we can all get along. And I can't think of too many places in the world that might need that type of photography more than this region. Crystal Wright is someone whom I did accidentally find before this. While I did not throw her name in here, I happened to be at a trade show a couple years ago and walked across a video screen where I saw this amazing video of a small group of friends, one of them being Crystal, who enjoy a bit of rustic outdoor life. They were out in British Columbia, hanging out in a very hidden gorge that they had to spend a lot of time hiking to. And as memory served, it looked like there was about a 3-story waterfall that they were kayaking off of. And instead of going super early, as photographers do, to do all kinds of fun stuff, get the best light, they chose to go on a full moon, and they went out in the afternoon and started doing this into night. And it was just really, really amazing footage that I saw. To want to put yourself there, to have the knowledge to achieve the goals that you did, and to enjoy the setting and the scene at the same time, really, really led me to appreciate her work. So if you're someone who does like the outdoors and, you know, maybe pushing the limits of things like that, as you see hanging off a cliff here on the right-hand side, definitely have a look at Crystal's work. So Jessie Meinet is kind of the converse of what we've been talking about. She grew up living overseas because of 2 military families. And instead of wanting to continue that, she came back home and she chose to bring all of that with her and use that to use her camera to show how people look their best in their home. I find this photograph of this pregnant woman by this lake so powerful, and just just beautiful overall. Really good concept of what family portraiture can be, or what telling a story of a historical document of time. I believe that there are two photographs in this world. There's a historical document that says, hey, I was here. And then there are the glitzy, the advertising, all the other fluffy stuff, right? This is just very, very powerful. So if this is the style you're into, it's another really good resource. There's quite a few in here, women that you can look towards for getting this kind of work done. Kathleen Clemens comes in as the second fine art photographer that was put forward in the modern sense of the word, per se. Kathleen has been working out of the middle coast of Maine for quite some time now, and she's highly represented by Corbis and Getty. When you go to her website, what blew me away is there's a ton of work like this, right? You look at this flower and you say, oh, that's beautiful macro work. Or maybe you came at it a different way and you go, oh, wow, that would be an amazing book cover, right? She has this way of kind of blending the line between what can be scientific and what can be art in regards to a lot of the natural world. She's very, very well established, as I said, even with the Santa Fe photographic workshops. And so she's someone that you could definitely lean on, much like Marcy Reef, and go take instruction from her too, if that is something you might be interested in. Katie Pearson is someone who's been winning a lot of awards. She's very much up and coming. Jillian from Minnesota put her in because Katie is just a little north of her with her Cloud9 Studios. So I'm not being a photojournalist background, I'm not always a big fan of the photoshopping and the photographic art, shall we say. But I looked at this photo of hers and I just immediately started laughing, and I appreciate it. It was a healthy, warm laugh. You have this guy on his Harley Davidson, and I know this part of the world, many men enjoy their motorcycles, as they should. Has his lovely wife hanging off the back, and she's got that the baby carrier with the diapers and things flying out at the back. Obviously, there's the daughter off to the left-hand side, looking kind of cheeky, not knowing if she's really ready for this or wants to be a part of what these two crazy people are doing. What impressed me, though, is anybody who's been out to the Midwest knows how flat and expansive the skies are. What Katie has actually done is not just put photo art together, she's chosen was really, really good landscape photography. And she's brought it into the studio, and she's been able to put these pieces together. And so I really, really liked it. This gave me a good laugh. Kirsten Lewis is another very interesting lady, as all of them are today, I feel. Starting out as an elementary school teacher, that wasn't quite what she wanted to do. And she moved out to the Outer Banks, and she decided she wanted to photograph. And she came up with a style that was all her own, which is something I think we all really struggle to, or at some point in our lives, try to do. It doesn't come overnight. It comes with a lot of practice, and it comes with understanding how our cameras work, but how our minds and our eyes work too, right? And the thing to know about Kirsten is she is a photographer's photographer. And I think that speaks a lot when your peers are the ones that want you to photograph their families. You know, people like Susan Stripling. I know that's something that I wrestle with. I kind of became a photographer because I don't want to be photographed, right? I know that's a cheap way out sometimes, but I'm particular. I have a lot of good photography friends and I love what they do, but that doesn't mean I want them to try and take a portrait of me. Whereas there's a few who I wish I could drag a portrait out of them because I really love what they do. And I think they're the only people who might understand me. I think in this day and age, that's something that photographers deal with. And so it does, like I said, speak a lot about your character and about your work when you are a photographer. I know there's been a lot of text. We're getting close to the end. These are our last two ladies in this vein, and they are a little different than what we've seen. If you're a colorist, if you're into interesting color, things of that nature, Ellie Pritz is your lady. She is from Chicago, and at the ripe old age of 19, she said, you know what? My photography would do better outside of college, so I'm leaving. She continued shooting. She ended up creating her own app called Hippo, which is a collaborative photo app. And from there, she started to get quite noticed to the point that she was one of the original people to start the @Apple Instagram campaign for Apple Computer. That's pretty huge. Apple being the third most valuable company in the world, I believe. And so from there, what do? She kept shooting. She definitely got into more color, and she created her own agency. So now she can help bring up other photographers and help the industry the way the industry didn't help her, the college setting, I guess I should say. Hunagana is a music photographer, and I very much relate to that. A lot of my background is music photography. And I included this image on the right for one specific reason. That's Grace Jones. Some of you might remember her, whether you remember her from being the crazy lady in the James Bond film, or you remember her for some of the crazy albums that she put out. The reason I put that image in there is because Grace is actually wearing, her outfit is the reverse of an Annie Leibovitz photo that she lived through at the time. Annie Leibovitz actually photographed Keith Haring, who was completely naked in an all-white room, and with these whereas white on her body was black in his room, and he stood there like this, scarily looking at the screen, or at the camera, I should say. And immediately I was blown away when I saw this. If you need a rabbit hole of event photography to fall down, Puna's website is absolutely amazing. She has taken so much time out of my life since I discovered her. What blew me away is she, besides working with a ton of amazing people, she has a very good way of making you seem as though you're backstage, and backstage is fun. It's not hoity-toity. It's not negative. It just always seemed to be super, super positive. Besides that, from her website, you can clearly see, and her work, you can clearly see that she shoots digital, she shoots Polaroid, she shoots regular film, she shoots Super 8 video. She goes through the gamut of what is still around and able to be used. And there's not too many people out there trying to do that these days. You know, many of us are just arguing over whether or not we like a Canon or a Nikon camera, and she doesn't care. She's shooting anything and everything that she possibly can. I highly recommend her. If you're a music event photographer, please have a look at her site. She's based out of Austin, Texas, and her work is unbelievable. So that's kind of who's keeping it pushing right now that we know of. And with that, we come to our last lady. And this is my second choice to put forward. This is quite an interesting story for some of you who may or may not know. The woman Vivian Dorothy Meyer. Vivian Meyer was a nanny for only, I believe, 3 families in her lifetime. She grew up in a little village in France, very close to the Swiss border, and at a very young age moved to New York and had very little family contact. When she left Europe, she was leaving for good. She came out and she started nannying, and at the time, the only request she had for her families is that she could have an extra lock put on the door to her room, which was usually upstairs in the attic, that only she had control of, because she was a little bit of a pack rat and she enjoyed the camera. People always remembered her having a camera. People never really remembered seeing prints or rolls of film hanging around unless she was loading them in. So after she finished nannying later in life, she was still living, she'd moved from New York to Chicago. She had been living in Chicago for quite some time. And unfortunately, one winter, she was on a street corner in Chicago and she slipped and fell on some ice. She was taken to the hospital where she never fully recovered and ended up passing. She had, unbeknownst to the world, prepaid a storage unit across town for, if I remember correctly, 5 more years after her death. And once that money ran out and nobody paid it, that storage unit went up for auction. A young man bought it, opened up, found some photographs, found a ton of unprocessed film, and said, "Holy cow, who is this?" He began looking through and realizing that this woman was amazing at her craft. you may not realize it, but you're looking at multiple reflections of her self-portrait of herself in a window there on the left-hand side. She had a very adept way of using reflection and street life as a whole. Just most prolific street photographer of her time that I can think of that we never knew. And then unbeknownst to us, a few years later, another storage unit comes up in another part of the country. And I think to date, there's been 3. One of the ways we might know her is because of the documentary Finding Vivian Meyer, which was based on trying to get her work out, going back to Europe, sourcing and making sure that all of her family was found. And so they could be paid if they need to be paid, and no one was ever found. And now she is represented technically by herself, but the money goes back into the Vivian Meyer Fund, as well as the 2 gentlemen, I believe, that have kind of controlled her negatives up until this point. So we look at her work. One of the things you see, this was before Instagram, right? This is 2¼ by 2¼ beautiful twin lens reflex camera. As you can see on the right, again, in another reflection right there of her shooting. And I believe that's of her much, much younger. One of the things I can appreciate, and you can test me on this, go to vivianmeyer.com and look at her various, I want to say folios, but she didn't have a folio. Look at all the images that they've listed, because there's quite a few. And what you'll see is a beautiful interplay such as you see here, right? These 2 photos have nothing to do with each other. Most likely were not taken on the same day. Were maybe not even the same city. But when you look at this, you realize that they match hand in hand. They could go together. There's very much a humanity talking back and forth in her imagery. And because she was a nanny, she could deal with children as easily as she could deal with adults. And most stories let us know that she could be a little forceful in what she would say to people on the streets. She was always kind to her children, but she was always protective of them too, in the situations where she would take them, because she could be found shooting in parts of town that maybe you didn't want to know that she had your children out there during the day, just walking and getting exercise and doing the daily chores of shopping and things of that nature. So if this is something you're into, or if you're trying to get a better grasp of contrast and black and white photography, and she's kind of a top bar for me in creativity and in black and white photography. I highly suggest that you fall down that rabbit hole as well. So with that being said, happy birthday again to Dan's. Thank you for your time. Thank you for having me today, and I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed that. You hit some of my all-time favorite photographers, and then brought out a whole bunch that I'm going to have to go investigate now. Let's see. So let's hit the Q&A and hit the chat and see if we've got any questions. Oh, here's one. I should have been taking notes and names, but I didn't. Can you share a list of the names of photographers you showed us? I can answer that one, because I'm going to be sending a follow-up email out to everybody after this, so that you can go back and rewatch it. If something went by too fast or you missed somebody's name, you're going to get the replay so that you can go back and look at these. And I'll try to make some notes on a bunch of the photographers so that you've got those names written down as well. And that will also include another link to that those bonus rebates that we talked about, so that you've got all that information.
Thank you to Nate. I see he mentioned Cindy Sherman. Again, like I said, tip of the iceberg. You're not the first person to mention her, and I think if I get to do a round 2, I will definitely have her included.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just so many super influential photographers. It's interesting that there are, women in photography, and then I started thinking about it and wow, it's so many of my favorite photographers, and I never really kind of thought about it that way.
Yeah.
Let's see. Great to see you know all these names. Thanks so much. This presentation would still be more powerful being presented by a woman.
It's true.
Yeah, that's probably true.
I'm sorry. At least I'm honest enough to say I'm not here to mansplain, and all of these did come from a woman. Women, I should say.
Let's see. Oh, there's an interesting question. What would you say sets women photographers apart from their male counterparts?
Oh, this is purely opinion based. I can answer this very quickly. I deal with this because my wife works in the sciences and I work in the arts. We always butt heads, but because of how we view the world. But that's not to say it's a bad thing. I can easily look through her eyes and see things that I don't normally see, or a way to see it. She very much helps me calm down. And I know it's only because of how she chooses to view a situation. There are plenty of photographs I've seen where I wouldn't think to go there, right? As an example, I tie myself down a little bit. I don't like carrying a tripod because it forces me to move around and choose a different viewpoint than other than being 6 foot tall and always shooting from right here. The only other way I can get that is by looking through photography and trying to put myself in their shoes and figure out maybe how or why they chose to go that route. And that is something that I appreciate doing, which is why I created a program like this. I think there's for lack of a better term, a sensuality of the mind. I know myself personally, I get way too analytical, and that's why I enjoy the mathematics. So I lean towards a Robert Frank, intersecting lines that are kind of very specific, whereas I'm not Julia Margaret Cameron. I look at that and I go, well, that's awesome. There's no way I'm going to be able to do that. I don't have that kind of imagination or that kind of heart or that kind of soul. That doesn't mean I don't have a heart and a soul. I just don't have hers. It's
not that same, right? Like a Sally Mann kind of a perspective is very different. Yeah. Dorothea Lange made the most famous American photo. Yeah, that's probably true. Right? Like Migrant Mother. Like, everybody knows that picture.
True. Oh, yeah.
Repeat the name of the group that included 64. I missed that.
F64, as in f-stop 64. It's called Group F64.
Right. As in like extreme depth of field, everything in focus, everything sharp, right?
Exactly. And if you go to Wikipedia right now, you'll find a very good, quick outline of what the group was.
Let's see. Let's see if we've got more questions. Nate says, loves his presentation. Perhaps African-American photographers, maybe another program. You know, that's actually something that I just started digging into myself. And that's another thing, just a different perspective, a different set of eyes.
Many years ago, I volunteered for quite some time at the Australian Centre for Photography, and we were having a book sale. And at that time is when I'd been doing a lot of music photography. And I looked down and there was a book about a photographer from Mali in the 60s that he did what I was doing. He would just go out at night and photograph people dancing. And I was so blown away and amazed by what I was seeing. All this time, you know, I'd kind of thought, oh, this is just me, or there's very few people. You don't think about it in a historical context that people have been doing event photography for. Brassai was doing it in Paris, right?
Sure.
So, yeah.
Let's see.
I see. I don't, forgive me if I am misspelling your name, or Ms. Kowalska's question. Does the different point of view give different access for women? I don't think I'm qualified to answer that. But what I would say to the question is, I don't think that access is something that always needs to be given, right? Sometimes me sitting on a street corner taking pictures without anybody knowing, nobody's giving me access. I'm choosing to do that. So it's not always as clear cut as maybe that question could be.
Interesting. Let's see. Got a bunch of thank yous. All right. So now we've got a technical question. Recently bought a Tamron 600 millimeter, which could be sharper. How can I test this lens to see if it might be my eyes or the lens?
How can you test the lens? So the question here, this is a little general. We had a version 1 and a version 2, and there was an optical difference between the two of them, right? If it's a newer one, and this is my top secret tip for everyone on this program right now. if you bought a lens and you're in your industry leading warranty, which we give warranty and repair situation, if you think something's wrong, you don't have to guess. If you don't want to deal with it, you can send your lens and your camera into us. You'll pay to send it to us. We'll send it back to you, and we will tune them together for you free of charge. That is part of your warranty. That's a bit of a general question. Because it's not just the lens. Is it the diopter? Do we know our diopter's okay? Is that's what's going on here?
Sure.
But this is a case where you could schedule a class with Scott and he could work with you in real time. And if that isn't if he can't answer it, then you can kick back and call our customer service and we'll take care of you immediately.
All right. Well, we are way over time. I think that's all we've got time for today, but that's fine. This is a fascinating presentation, and I really enjoy like when we get to like sit down and talk photographers and art history and all that stuff. So once again, thanks so much for joining us today, to both Tamron and to all of you who made a little time to join us this afternoon. Watch your email for that follow-up that I'll be sending out. And I do have one more thing for you. I'm going to share a little bit of stuff. We've got, pardon my screen share difficulties here. There we go. Screen sharing has failed to start. You stopped your screen share, right? There we go. There we go. I have a coupon for you as a thank you for joining us today, this afternoon. We're giving you a free 8x10 print. Take some of your pictures, make some prints. This is one free 8x10 for everybody that's joined us for this webinar this afternoon. Gallery 8x10 is your coupon code that you're going to enter at checkout. That will get you a free 8x10 print. All right. And thanks so much for joining us. We've also got, there we go, some other new options that we're rolling out. We have Curbside Pickup is coming back. So if you place an order for something, stay safe and warm, stay in your car. We'll bring it out to you. If you are maybe outside of the general vicinity, we are now delivering because there are so many problems with shipping and the mail and all that stuff right now. We started our own courier service. Give us a call and let us know that you'd like to have your package brought to your house. If you're in Northampton or Lehigh counties, we will bring it to you at your door for an extra, I think like $5. All right. So with that, once again, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. I hope to see you again soon. We've got a ton of other seminars coming up today, and then they start right back up again tomorrow morning. Thanks for joining us. And we'll see you later. Bye, everybody.